Thanks everyone for joining. This is only the second one of our little community workshop series, and we got way more signups than expected, which is amazing. It also means we have to learn probably a lot about what's the best way to format these. What do people want? But we did get everyone's questions or responses to, the state of design systems and how AI tools are using them today. And we really want to make this, real. Like we see a lot of hype and tweets and LinkedIn posts and brand teaser videos, and we're all about, actually just showing you the real thing. The way we work, we build Subframe and Subframe, and everything I'm be showing you today is exactly what's possible today in the platform that you could go and explore and hopefully follow along. But yeah, definitely it's a big group, so it's hard to keep this super conversational. I'll probably be yapping for a long time, but keep chats, questions in chat. And August is co-hosting here. He's gonna be, pinging me, answering kind of questions as they come up. And we have a lot of time. We extended the time just for, some buffer. Hopefully we won't go the full hour and a half, but basically I'll be building, I'll be showing off what you could do. I'll be actually setting up some real custom components, getting into the weeds a bit today. And then we just want to leave room for questions that we can really answer and hear from you guys what you're looking for and what you'd like to see more. So yeah, without further ado, let's kind of get started. Let's go ahead. All right. And I will try to make my Zoom window uh, somewhat not in the way, but we'll see. Might have to move things around. All right, so yeah, welcome everyone. We're gonna cover a bunch of things today. The theme is really right, like how do you design with your own systems with all of these AI tools that are coming up on the scene? Because I think, as everyone mentioned in, their responses, it's really a big pain point where you as designers are creating systems, creating components. I've led design systems in the past as well. I've been deep into this. I've been the one who's, pitching the CEOs, CTOs of the value of them. And now it seems like we're trying to pitch the value to AI tools, right? Because they're kind of doing their own thing. And we know we're using them to accelerate a lot of things during the design process. But Subframe has a pretty unique approach that fits nicely in this world, which is that we are component first, and it is driven by your system that you bring into it. And we've added AI later. And so that kind of changes the, way of working and hopefully fits a lot more with how designers work today. And eventually designers how they work in the future, which I really do believe is a lot more systems driven thinking. And by systems, I don't just mean the, icons and components and badges that we've been used to for design systems, those Lego pieces. I think it's really expanding more into the UX patterns we're doing, the way we generate designs and then curate them and iterate on them, and basically guiding how design fits in the middle of idea to implementation. And I think is in a really unique position to, it essentially defines what gets built. And the closer designers get to code, the closer designers are to steering those systems and defining them. I think the better that the outcomes are going to be. So today we'll do it's kind of our quick intro. I'm Philip, designer, co-founder of Subframe. I'm a designer first. I do have a technical background. I studied computer science, and then I realized all of these kids in my classes are way smarter than me and better at coding. So I double majored in computer science and art. And design kind of naturally fell in the middle as someone who is a creative thinker first, but really learn to understand technology and how software gets built. And so Subframe is really the culmination of those two worlds. We're built by myself and two of my co-founders who are, front end and just engineering like geniuses, honestly, and built this design to code layer first, a full drag and drop tool. We're actually using Subframe here to do our little slideshow, right? So it's full drag and drop, things that are used to, but everything is code, and then everything is component driven and layered in with AI because it's 2025. Um, so we'll go a little bit into, the questions that you guys answered about the state of design systems and how we'll touch on that. Then we'll, dig into Subframe, actually set up a design system, talk about some of the different ways of importing your system into a tool like Subframe. We'll try to build something fun just to demo with that. And then we're going to get into exporting code a bit as well, because again, everything you're working with code. And while Subframe provides that design layer, you probably have questions about what does it look like after a design is done. And then lastly, we'll leave that open for Q&A. So, state of design systems and AI. Let's do a fun little exercise. And again, everything today we are going to be doing live. So, if things don't work, if we run into hiccups, that is, the world we live in, and we're not doing any smoke and mirrors here. We're actually just building exactly how we build, and hopefully anything we run into, we can use that to improve. So I'm going to do this fun little prompt where I took all of your guys' responses. I just did it in ChatGPT to parse out, the names and stuff. And I'm just going to do design a page that analyzes and summarizes the following responses to the question, what is the biggest pain points with design systems and AI tools today? So we'll actually do analyze and summarize and group into key themes for the following question. And we'll say, I'll paste that in here. We got a giant text box now. And we'll say use direct quotes as evidence for each theme. So this is probably something a lot of you guys do with things like ChatGPT these days. And it's kind of fun to put some of these things into a tool like Subframe because obviously we're going to get a more visual output. And I'll just kind of be going through here a little bit. I think a lot of people, let's see if I can predict some of these themes. There's an aspect of how do we get just AI tools to support our design system in the first place? There's a few different ways to do that. Subframe is, one tool, and we're sort of one workflow in this group, and we'll obviously be focusing on that today because it is a design-driven workflow. But I think what was interesting is a lot of people mentioned things around just design systems in general, right? Like teams not having enough support, engineers not building these things out. So I think it's an interesting world we live in where those design systems are still important, and we're basically, you know, they're more important than ever, and they're also less important than ever. It's kind of a hot take here, which is that they are the component, right? They are driving so much of things like large language models, which, generate on existing patterns and are really good at rebuilding different blocks and rearranging them. Systems are really important to create those guardrails for AI tools. But at the same time, AI tools have pretty much like made software so much more malleable, right? We can basically redesign things really quickly. We can ship things really quickly. We could iterate and change things really quickly. And I think that's an interesting world we live in where we both have to really embrace the systems thinking, but we should also be kind of breaking away from the rigidity of them in the past because they can change and evolve even faster. All right. So what we'll also be doing today, right, is retheming, building that system ourselves. So here we're starting with something that probably looks like what every AI tool in the world will generate, a bunch of generic cards, some generic colors. But it did, let's see, I'm going to drop this in here, which is something that, we do in Subframe is everything is a design layer. So you can take these AI generations, move them around, and let's see what we got with some of these themes. So the integration workflows, putting them all together, design systems and AI tools not being connected, right? That's a big one of just how do we even input things. Maintenance, that's an interesting one, right? Is who's doing the maintenance and things like that. Um, because code is really where components live. We have speed and iteration. I think, yeah, how a lot of these tools help us get that initial idea faster, but we are designers. We need to refine where do we use AI to go fast? Where do we slow down to make things better, either before AI or after AI? Quality, right? We got sterile generic layouts, having to define that, define your style, flexibility and consistency. I think this one seems to be something that comes up with design systems in general, right? And something what I mentioned with those systems today is when do we break from it and when do we really just want to adopt it? And then looks like this is about, yeah, both AI and design systems, like how do you actually get them in your workflows on your teams? Subframe is really a big believer in being a tool for real companies, real with working with real engineers and existing code bases. There's plenty of tools that let you do a side project really quickly, right? And just put something out into the world. But we're really trying to integrate into real workflows and support them. And so that's kind of what makes Subframe, right? Is we are in this funny category of design tool and AI code tool. We have full drag and drop, something that you don't get in any like LLM chat first tool. But we still have that chat first prompt to design, right? That we just used. You can also prototype with AI, which is a beta feature I'll be showing that we've been developing, and it's more familiar to things like AI code tools that can really just generate anything. But we have custom components, right, that you can define, you can build. It's designers who can now build React components, which is really exciting to answer to that question. Those components get synced. We have code export that's not AI generated, which again fits into that workflow of, hey, like this is real code that developers should be using. It should be trustworthy. It should be tied to your system. And then back to, design tools, multiplayer collaboration. We could all be working in the same file. And something that's really unique in the land of AI is just how much we can personalize it. So Subframe learns not just your system, but it can actually ingest way more context around, your documentation, your product features. It could, as you build in it, it learns from your designs and existing pages, and you're basically training it as you go. And this is something that's, siloed to your team, your project, and really helps build this AI that actually starts to be pretty good as you add more ingredients. So getting into actual design system stuff, right? There's kind of two approaches in the world today. I'm not mentioning the one where, something just designs a generic, uses off-the-shelf ShatCN library with an AI code tools. So in Subframe, what that looks like is two ways. One is the Subframe first approach. Something that's unique about Subframe is when we actually go in and look at it here, we give you a design system component library out of the box. So this is pretty standard, things that you might expect, things that you probably don't want to spend a bunch of time rebuilding, like sliders. And this is something that comes out of the box, it's themable, and it's customizable as well. And we'll be doing that in a second. But every component here, even though this is a real React component with props, you could go in and you can actually see the designs and edit the designs as well, right? If we want to make our badges rounded, for example. So the subframe first approach is really great for these kind of leveraging this pretty good front end library out of the box, allowing designers to create those components themselves. We have some ways to import design tokens, your colors, your themes really quickly. And then you basically are in this world where the source of truth is Subframe. Designers own components. They can design with them, and that code gets synced. That means that you're probably going to be, if you're trying to rebuild some designs from things like Figma, we rebuild with your design system. So if you paste a screenshot, things like that, it's not going to try to match it exactly. It's going to match it to the system. So the better your system is, because again, it's the real code, the better your designs translate. But because we're a full design tool, we hope that, you start to just design in Subframe as we do. And so this is really great for the 0 to 1 use cases, right? You get started with something out of the box, you could fully customize it. Or we have seen teams adopt it incrementally. Maybe they're migrating, maybe they have a messy design system and they're like, wow, these components are great. Designers can design with it. Why don't we just start to move over to this? We also have this new feature called Bring Your Own Components. So BYOC, if anyone's from the Midwest, like BYOB, I feel like is, the reference here. But basically what this allows you to do is replace all of these components that we have with your actual components from code. So this is something if you've already built out your design system, you have a team that manages that, the source of truth is your actual code that's live in the app. We could bring that in, and the same way you design with our buttons, you could design with your buttons. You could connect your design system documentation there so it learns. And we also, basically Storybook, things like Storybook is something where you can rebuild from. And this is something we have for kind of larger pilots right now with mature design systems and hoping to self-serve soon. So a great example of this, which I just added this morning. So you could see that Polaris is Shopify's design system. It's pretty robust. It's also open source because there's a lot of big developer community building on top of it. And you could see that all of these components, cards, even these, fancy color picker button, this is all directly what you see in Shopify, Polaris. So this exact button is now in Subframe, including some of these larger components, like a media card, looks like they have with all the props, and you could just design with it. So I kind of very quickly recreated this page. We get all our interactions here, we get all the variants. You can continue to, I think this state is a little, uh, there we go. You could continue to drag things around, use it as you would. You could also ask AI, which now knows the system, to do things like design a detail page with a color picker and tags for different variants, right? So we can kick off AI now that is kind of using a really small library right now because it only has a few components that I added in. Polaris is like hundreds of components. But you could already see that you get pretty close to the real thing, right? Where again, I think they're actually using a different design system here, slightly different. But you can actually everything you see here, when you look at the code is actually importing from Shopify Polaris and basically having all of the props that you would expect from that development team. So you can see here, we asked it to design a new page, and it's doing its best with only like 10 components that I've added to this demo. Um, but that's kind of the vision is that the same way we have built an AI that ingests our components, you could do that with your components too. So if anyone's working on a team that is interested in this, definitely let me know. We have a decently long wait list right now before we can fully generalize it because everyone's system is a bit different. But usually, if you have React, if you have um, storybook that makes things a lot easier. And of course, you can go back to design mode and it looks like, yeah, it used our thumbnails, it used our buttons. We probably like don't want a label here for whatever this text is supposed to be. And I think what we really wanted is to insert that color picker. So we could add that here, full width, which I believe, there we go. And just like that, we now have something that we did very quickly, but is actually tied to this design system. And it also looks very different, right? You got all the details that make something not feel generic that are baked into your components already. We can support all of that. So that's kind of the state of the world today, especially in Subframe. It's these two paths of use the design system in Subframe. You can also just use it to really just help with the design process, right? Make it look like your design system, talk with engineering about adopting it, or if you have a fully built out one, let's go ahead and yeah, start importing those. So there's truly becomes a single source of truth, and designers are literally designing with those components. We've touched on a lot of this, but let's go ahead and build some things. And I think there's a few things to keep in mind. As you've seen, we Subframe works on layers that are built similar to design system, where there's a theme layer that controls, all the global settings, the look and feel. It's your colors, it's your fonts, your typography, and all of that gets funneled into, components and of course the pages where you use, specific background colors and things like that. So a theme does a lot. As a designer, I think typography is probably one of the number one ways to make a design feel unique. We as humans, that's how we consume content, and typography is subtle. You don't really notice it the same way that you do colors, but it makes a huge difference. Of course, colors is also there, and then all the little stuff like, drop shadows and things like that. So you could see here when you go to our theme, we let you set all of this up. We have a little actual import feature that lets you add a bunch of tokens at once. That's probably shipping later today or tomorrow. I was not able to get it in for the demo. But colors, creating new palettes, or importing colors from palettes, it's all in here, as well as, your typography, bringing in fonts and all the good stuff, right? So that really sets up your system on a theme level. Then we get into components, which is all the things we know and love as designers, all our buttons, all our cards, and you could edit them just as I showed you. And then that is used to compile pages together, right? Where you kind of start mixing all of these pieces and gets into more of that development workflow. So we're going to set up a couple of each of these things. We're going to show how AI fits into each piece, where you want to lean into it, and it's really good and fast, where you want to some of the limitations today, especially just subframe specific. Um, and when you want to just go, hey, like I don't need AI for this. I'm a designer. I still want to design with my full control. And then we have I'll do a quick prototype with our beta feature, which has some neat interactions. So yeah, for the next probably 15 minutes or so, we're gonna be building, and it's gonna go quick. So we won't get super into the weeds, but let's focus on Airbnb, right? We're all familiar with it. And you could see that just before this call, I asked it to say, hey, um, just design me a property listing for Airbnb. And it did an okay job here, right? Like, um, it's mostly a familiar layout, but again, it's ingesting our theme right now, right? Which
Hello.
is fairly generic. And we want to basically, we even have the sidebar that, is obviously not Airbnb style, and we want to make this page better. So I'm gonna go ahead and I actually think this one's, this one did a really good job. We could apply this to the design. And I think, yeah, this one is pretty good. I think some of these fonts, um, because I renamed them, we want to just like update real quick. But you could see that, we have currently our theme, and we'll do a little bit of recreating the Airbnb theme, but it's also fun. We recently hooked up AI to our theme as well. So this is kind of the limitation is, I'm actually I'll just do this live so we can see. Let me pull in my little prompt that I actually like. So I'm going to ask it to create a cool retro neumorphic style theme, right, with warm grays, gradients. And I'm going to ask it to update this page and the theme. So we always have context about the page you're working on, and we're going to fire that off. So I would say everything we're doing here, right, it's again, these kind of two worlds. Either you're going 0 to 1 and you're like, how can I use AI to really help shape something that is more interesting to me? Um, really quickly that doesn't look like every right AI generated design out there. Or how do I go in and actually we'll do that after, fine tune the details or bringing in an existing system where you really want to, have that style that you already have embedded in your product. So we could do both right now. Um, Bringing in your own system, again, unless you're bringing in those components directly, it's a bit of a manual process right now. We're going to try to make that faster, whether it's importing tokens from Figma or being able to let you generate components or update components. That's something that keep in mind right now. Our AI, it can update the theme and it's going to update the page, but it won't update your components. Basically, anytime you go in to, oh, let me go back here. Anytime you go into the component level, we don't have AI
No,
hooked
no, not that long.
just because there's
Yeah,
a lot of
sure.
intricacies in making sure that the code generated for components works well. So that's why this process is a bit more manual. It's like going in and updating every variant and adding your colors. So something just to keep in mind, but it's definitely something we're gonna bring into the future. All right, so let's see what it did. You'll see here that first it generated this theme for me, which we get a little preview here of the colors it picked. And then we also get a preview of this page that we have here with the new theme. So I could go ahead and apply that, and boom, we just did it on the theme level, right? So we updated the colors, updated everything in that theme page, but sometimes that's not everything, right? And that's where, again, those layers of components versus themes versus page level styles, it all kind of blends together. And for example, here, because I asked it to also update the page after the theme, it's now going and actually doing one more pass on not just the tokens that were being ingested here, but actually anything to do on the actual page level, updating those tokens themselves or doing things that are, updating the page background, things like that that are not embedded in your current theme. So we're missing that components layer. If you wanted to say, hey, make the buttons, super sparkly, add shadows to them. It's not going to do that yet, but the theme and page level we can do pretty quickly with AI. And that usually gets you pretty far. Let's wait for this one to finish. I'll kind of, yeah, while we're waiting, maybe, and we're kind of getting into it, just quick pause for the chat. Anything come up?
Yeah, there were a couple of questions as you were talking through the Shopify Polaris. So James asked, what about components from a commercial solution like Prime Faces, for example?
What was that last part? Like Prime?
Prime Faces?
I'm not sure what Prime Faces is, but if it's like your own company's design system, yes, that's something we can import.
And then what about importing an existing coded page? Is that possible?
Yeah, so right now, Roger, that's not there. We have some teams who are doing interesting things with bringing pages into their storybook, which does require some additional layers of, again, on your own end of setting up those states and mock data. The thing with pages, and we'll see that in code, is just there's so much logic built into pages and layers of nested components that it's very hard to actually break that apart back into the design layer. So I think there's going to be a world where one, again, via storybook-like setup, you could probably, or we could find a way to render existing states of pages to reference in Subframe. And, I think the idea is that the more you componentize not just the little blocks, but the bigger blocks, things like layouts as well, a big component with slots for the children that manages the layout state. I think it's a world where it becomes a lot easier to very quickly just recreate a page with those same components and building blocks. Um, but yeah, definitely not a direct import other than essentially asking AI to do its best job with the building pieces you do give it. Mason, yeah, theme up. I feel you there. I add copying and pasting hex codes is not fun. Yes, charts, graphs, tables, those are things we could bring in as well. We have very basic charts, so usually people do bring in their own. Um, all right, we will get to this, but let me hide my zoom or make it smaller so that we could go back to seeing what the page did. Let's see. How do I make this zoom smaller? I'm just gonna, okay, perfect. All right, so yeah, you could see that now that we've actually updated the page, we have a very subtle but different look and feel, right? Like there's some of these shadows, it added some colors, right? It took a stab at that, some of these backgrounds. And I think that's what gets really interesting is just it's a good way to play around and see, okay, if I change things on this level, what happens? If I change things on the component level, what happens, right? If I change things on the page level, how far can I move this design into the direction that I want? So we just applied it and we can actually inspect this now that um, let's see, shadow large, right? It's actually not using a lot of custom classes, which is what sometimes it does, things like gradients. Um, but it did make a pass on some of these changes. I think it did things like update shadow from probably it was a smaller shadow before to large, all because we gave it that context about the theme. So this is kind of where we are right today. We got like, hey, it's Airbnb, obviously with placeholder images, but slightly different. And let's actually now take the time to let's call this our listing page. And let's go ahead and actually create some custom components though. So let's see what we got here. I think this is an easy one, but a lot of times I think designers have been in this world of you build always having to decide like do you build the thing first and then componentize, or do you componentize and then rearrange it? So I don't think I have the I don't think there's a perfect answer. It depends on the workflows, but I will say for Subframe, um, because our components right now aren't hooked up to the AI, I do recommend starting with a page, even asking it to just generate a single component, quote unquote, and then going from here, probably what you're used to Figma and creating a component here, right? So we could go ahead and take this card that's already pre-made. We'll call this property card. And you can see we're already suggesting properties for you. So we got our icon, this is probably like our title text. and then we have our subtitle. And so I could go ahead and create this component. Now we're in that Figma world that we're used to. You could rearrange this. You could see there's a max width on here, and it just took all the styles, just like Figma, everything that we're used to, into this component that's now reusable. Now, what's I think pretty cool when you get into the component level details, and now we're going to be really zooming in into, I think components are something that's kind of the, somewhat advanced use case. It's a little bit more nuanced compared to things like Figma, where you could do anything, and that's because um, everything here, again, we just made a React component, right? We need to be working within the constraints of code. And so obviously we have our things like hover states, and I can add an override to that. So maybe we make it a shadow medium on hover, so it feels a little like we're pressing down on it. And then we could also create variants, where maybe, because we have a property, we're going to be changing the icons, but maybe there's one where we just want to show a badge. So maybe we call this like, show badge, and we could go ahead and add a badge here. And so this is an interesting point, and sometimes it gets people tripped up. So I added a badge here and it added it everywhere. And that's technically by design, because what we're doing here is not baking in. These are kind of dumb components. They don't have a lot of logic built into them. They're things that, we want Subframe to be that source of truth that designers manage, so that engineers, when they build logic on top of components, they could do that either in a wrapper, or there's ways to detach that as well. But I think the magic is really when designers can continue to make updates on the component level. And so there is a little bit of a trick here, which is I probably could have made this actually the opposite, is hide badge. And if I hide it here, right, we can now hide it and it's still showing here as well. So this it's kind of a way to, we could also do the opposite where we could hide it here, go back to this variant and show it. And basically, anytime you see this little pink dot, those are our overrides. And so that's kind of the way to make some of those changes. So we could have this where, maybe this says new, and then we could also say, okay, maybe we call this new badge, and then we could add, well, I probably should have made that a not a Boolean prop, but maybe in new badge on hover, we actually want to change this to be, let's see. Uh, Here, I'll go ahead and just create a new one here. And you could see I can pick up the badge as well. And maybe in this variant, we have a green badge. Um, so actually, I believe these should be updating unless we didn't ship the variant feature this morning in prep for the demo. Anyway, we're running into, and this is exactly what I want to show, right? This is what gets people sometimes tripped up when getting into real custom component stuff, is like there are intricacies because you're working with code, where these should definitely work, where the variants update only in the one you're looking at. But there is a little bit of nuance into getting these exactly how you want, because we need to render the proper code with the way we show and hide things. So definitely more advanced use case, but keep things, let us know how we can improve, because I think components are due for a refresh. What I wanted to show though that is pretty cool is the power of slots on the component level. So slots are something that's rooted from code. We'll call this one children. That's just happens to be the default for like React slots. And what they let you do is create these stacks where you could put anything in here. So we're gonna go ahead and put a button, right? And it's gonna be there by default. Um, and the difference between just putting a button and putting a button in a slot I don't know what to call this. Maybe learn more, right? The difference between that is related to both on the design level, the flexibility you want, and then on the development level, how things like, button has its own on-click handlers, things like that, how that gets routed in. You basically want to give a level of control and almost like a peek into things. And so what we did here is if we go back to our listings page, right? This is now our component. We've made it. We could go and show the badge, hide the badge. We could change all the props that we have here. And then we have this interesting child component where I could go ahead and just delete this, right? So we didn't have to have that there by default, but I could also go in and add another button. And I guess we probably wanted to make that wrap. There we go. And so it gets into this interesting world where I think what we saw with some of these intricacies of setting up these variants and things like that, where slots are really a great answer to things where you want to contain sort of the visual layer. Maybe it's the padding, maybe it's the spacing, maybe it's the layout, maybe it's the elements that are always there. But you basically want flexibility in what you put in here. So you could see that the way this actually generates the code is really clean, right? We have the props that we did set up that are always there, like icon, bedroom, title, subtitle. But then we put anything inside the card, and now we have access to those click handlers, etc. So I know this is probably pretty in the weeds, but basically components, that level of editing and theming, it's a really at least good to know as a designer of how some of these front end principles work. Because again, the closer you get to working with code, the more these things you can use to your advantage. And I think it's worthwhile because, you could really go deep in learning how components work in Figma, and that only teaches you that tool. Versus going deep into components and things like Subframe actually teaches you React and how things work. Um, so soon we'll be able to have AI to help with a lot of this, I think. But definitely a really good way of showing, how components can go really deep, or, we obviously have our badges and buttons and things like that. The cool thing is because we updated this theme, you could see that even my slides, right? These were updated, but they do look a bit different, right? Because the styles itself didn't have this nice layer of application that they did here. So what we could do instead is the way you iterate and try to keep consistency with your designs in Subframe is, like I mentioned, it learns from what you've already built, and you could also feed it these specific ingredients as well. So what I'm going to do is go back to Ask AI, and this is kind of our remix function where you can add designs to your context. And obviously, we only have one page here. It's kind of a similar boat, right, to Shopify, but where it doesn't have all these ingredients yet. But we could basically say, based on the styles uh, in this page, create a new page that has a uh, two-column layout. The left column should be a chat messaging interface for being able to look up uh, places uh, via chatbot. And the right side is a large map area that will show an interactive map. Show cards for each place. All right, so I wrote this little prompt. I have this idea in my head of what if we took Airbnb and let you actually chat with it and have a map. So because I said, hey, based on, maybe I just say the design uh, of the current page, and of course, prompt engineering is an art form. we're going to ask it to create a new page. And so that way it's taking some of this and being able to design a new page. And you can really start to think about that where when you iterate, when you design things like the existing, you have your global things on a theme level, you have your components, and then pages become this more malleable context that you can include or not include in AI generations so that you could steer it even further. This is very similar to, being able to set the context here, like a system level prompt where we could say things like, always make sure that the background is gray, right? Like we could set that up as a token, or we could also prompt the AI to follow specific rules that you might have in like design system documentation, in something like Polaris. So that's kind of what I meant. It's a little bit of touches on that. Systems matter because they really create constraints, but the way you tell them that is either you can just give it only the system and tell it to follow the rules, right? Like you create a design token that's page background and that's the default on all page backgrounds. Or you could just tell it more softly with a prompt, right? On a system level of like, hey, always follow these rules. And it also gets the job done, which is where things like the flexibility of like, do I refactor my entire app, right? Like, does that mean, yes, you could set up all the work to have a design token and you could only change it in one place, but then AI is also really good at just doing a bunch of things for you for a specific ask. So that's kind of where we get into things of that are, thinking about those different system levels. So, okay, we could see we had this page here, and I'm going to go ahead and again hide this layout. I asked it for a left sidebar and then this right one. You know what? Obviously, this is a screenshot, and we're about to make it a map, which will be fun. But maybe I'm not happy with this design, right? Maybe I'll give it this current page and then this listings page again, and then say, um, take a look at the styles in the listings page and think of better designs for the current places map page that follow the new morphic theme better. Use large cards and padding um, on a layout level. So now we're getting into this kind of iterative step, right? Um, where I can go in and continue editing this design, right? That's what makes Subframe is, we could go in and say, hey, this background, should be primary 100. You could move things around. It looks like these components were created for me, which is great. Oh, did I lose my Okay, let's see. Let me go back. I have to rewrite my prompt. Take a look at the listings page and copy the styles uh, for the this is chat map better. Make use of large cards and padding on the layout level. Okay. And I added that places chat map and listing page. So let's see what it does in terms of this kind of iterative approach, right? Where you could kind of keep nudging it towards a certain way. And I think what gets interesting is basically like how you style this, how it performs, which again, the more pages you have and the better our theme is set up. We didn't do too much work of, importing tokens and things like that here. Um, it's a good way, like litmus test, to decide, hey, if the AI isn't really following these rules that well, it's not doing exactly what I want, maybe I should codify that as a component, right? Add it to the system so it becomes a harder constraint. So I think that's a good way to just really think about it better. And to answer that question, right, Roger, like where do things fall in on the map on a system level versus not? All right, I can already see. So I should have updated this default layout. That's something that we have. I won't go into too much, but it's basically a template for your navigation for all the pages. But the cards already did a better job because I did ask it to update those cards. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply that again. Looks like some of the main layout, it's not exactly what I was looking for. I was looking more for, something which is kind of the magic of Subframe, is we could just on the fly, do the thing we were looking for, um, without prompting, because I think as designers, right, we figure out that sometimes there's a faster way. There we go. That's what I was looking for. So we'll add corners here, hide that overflow, get rid of the borders. And then I also want to add overflow here. So I think there's a few ways to interact with AI in Subframe. Sometimes, there you go. We're trying to add scrolling here, which depending on how many containers you have, there we go. We got it. Um, and then maybe these should be horizontal. Okay, maybe those are too big. Anyway, you could see that there's different times where you want to use AI and when you don't, right? Like we're asking it to update big themes, we're asking it to generate multiple pages and do all these types of heavy lifting. But then sometimes all you want to do is basically say like, hey, add buttons for zooming, add icon buttons for zooming in and out to the right. And you could just ask AI inline as well. So these kind of more contextual edits that are good for smaller, more localized places. And actually delete this. We'll kind of keep this here. And I'm going to go ahead and delete that as well. So we're about to go into our little prototype mode and we'll see how it works. Yeah, we're coming up on an hour. Um, uh, Find a place via chat. All right. So yeah, there's a few different types of these contextual edits. Sometimes you could right click and like I showed before, you could just ask anything and it will default to AI. Sometimes you know exactly what you're looking for, which is more padding, and you could just search that. So anything in the properties panel is actually exposed here as well. And that allows you to just do things kind of really quickly, right? Without without worrying too much about waiting around and things like that. So go anywhere. We got our input and maybe we make this little map. All right, and so you can see what it did is the AI actually created some components for me if it does find them in the library. I'm not a huge fan of this right now, so I'm just gonna detach them. And I know this is like semi counter to what this is all about, which is like how to get it to use your design system. But I think I could spend some time editing them right now. It's a little bit faster to detach. And that's because I just want to take one of these cards. And what I would do is probably make this have a child slot so that I can basically put this stack kind of anywhere. But I'm just going to kind of quickly design it so to be what I want, right? And this should now be called property assistant. We'll just call this Airbnb. And again, all of these edits, all of this design world that we do every day, like you could just do, right? It feels like a design tool. It's something that you can continue to refine. It's something that, the more you bring in components and stuff, the smarter it gets, of course. But it's really up to you to decide when that um, when that AI is actually useful and when it's not. Okay, so we're gonna do fire off a quick prototype, and then I'm gonna just while that's happening, go over some of the code export. So imagine you're finished with this design and you're like, wow, Airbnb, we redesigned your entire theme. It definitely doesn't look like Airbnb anymore. But we also just created a new feature, which is like, what if you could just chat and have a map update on the right? And I'm actually gonna just delete that right now as a placeholder. And so this is something that we could build and prototype right now. And because you're entering the world where you need to go into code, right? To everything you're doing right now, some of the limitations are less the limitations and more of the constraints of working on the design layer is that this is static, right? Like sure, like we saw with you know, Shopify, you can make some components work here. Like they're interactive. If we added like an accordion, let's do that real quick, right? Like if you added an accordion, it actually opens up and down, which is great. But if you're actually trying to do something like let's render a map here, right? That's going to be a lot harder. And I think this is where things get into code, and where actually some of the other AI tools that people might be familiar with, your bolts, your cursors, your replets, actually play nicely. And all the code we generate here is that static code. If it does if you're using your components, it uses that. You could inspect it and take the whole page. But the way the handoff works is an engineer will usually either start with the whole page, or if you're just like integrating into an existing feature, they might just say, oh, I just need this little bottom, right? Like text field and chat bar. And that's why this kind of inspect works. And then they take it into their code base, into Cursor, and they fit it in where it belongs, and probably, lots of business logic, API calls, and different components in there. And then but they're copying the design as code, right? There's no translation layer. There's no NPC server or anything that's trying to interpret what you did into code. You're just giving them the code that exactly matches the design, the styles, right? Our shadows that are actually from the theme level directly from here. And what's cool about this is obviously if you have your working with your existing system, that should be set up pretty well. But it's also easy to just go into something like Bolt. And you can think of if you are using these other tools, like if your friendly engineer is actually Bolt, right, or another AI code tool, you could bring your designs from Subframe into these tools really easily, where you could do those things like hook up a backend and add more functionality. So I'm going to spin this up right now, real quick. We make it super easy. I just click this Bolt thing. And then I'm going to go back. Where were we? Here and generate the setup prompt. So this is some things that are needed to actually install and sync Subframe. So I think we could go ahead and just run this. Sometimes it asks me, okay, I don't know why Bolt is complaining here. Okay, looks like sometimes you gotta click some of those run command buttons. And then let's see. Uh, And then we basically copied this prompt, which pretty much just wrapped the code we have. And we basically just gave it the context for those components. And we're going to go ahead and paste that here as a prompt, which now you can add it to say, hey, whether you're creating a new page, or if the page already exists, right? It's kind of up to you. Or if you already have something and you're just adding in a component. But let's go ahead and see how well this does. Um, I'll wait for this to load. Hopefully, Bolt plays nicely today, but you could see run command. Okay, cool. It's doing that. And we'll be able to see that like all of our components are actually synced, and the page should render exactly as we designed it in Subframe, which is kind of this whole approach of everything you do in Subframe is that design exploration layer. But at a certain point, you want to bring that code over. And because it's code, it should be exactly the same. So there we go, right? That matches up pretty nicely. If we have our code here, you could see that it's updating all the subframe components, which are here. And these match exactly to what you have in subframe. We could go in and say, all right, guys, let's make our buttons, right, fully rounded, kind of just that classic case. Let's make them a little smaller. And actually, I don't know if we're using, I don't know if we're using any buttons here. I guess we're using this icon button. So let me undo that. And I know we're getting on time, but I wanted to do a little bit more of showing that kind of prototype mode and stuff, but I think that's good for another one. We're gonna go ahead and make this rounded, and then let's make this actually black. Okay, that's good enough for now. And what I could do now is click code. I'm gonna run the sync command, and let's go back to Bolt. And all you have to do is run a command, and this should actually update that icon button component. It's probably going to do a bunch of stuff. And uh-oh, did I really already use my credits? Well, just in time, you could see our button updated. So again, that single source of truth being Subframe, being your designs, being a system that you could take anywhere and have these AI code tools actually recreate and follow. We're basically creating that middle layer, right? For Subframe to be able to bring your designs anywhere. Now there's a lot with components. There's some things you want to do where you're working with these tools of like setting rules and stuff to tell it to use these components. Don't try to do crazy stuff by yourself. All of that sort of prompt engineering. But yeah, and here we could see that, we've created a design system, basically what Subframe gave us. We styled it, we created a page, we've updated components, and now we could have it anywhere we want. Let's see if I had anything here. Yeah, so exporting code, we saw what installation and sync happens, that everything you do in Subframe is a real component that actually lives locally in your code base. We saw how you could inspect just individual pieces if you're, working off of an existing one. We did the AI code tools, and Replit is pretty similar. It just runs locally. So, I don't have to probably cover that right now. I really wanted to, maybe while people are doing Q&A, I definitely wanted to make a real interactive map here, which is something you can do in prototyping. Uh, let's see, or maybe, okay, for the sake of time, let me just show you. I was inspired by this demo I did a bit earlier for someone to test out our prototyping features. And that's kind of the idea where, things like Bolt and Replit, etc., they let you do a lot of stuff. Um, actually build entire apps. Whereas, we're really more on that design layer where you're still exploring, where you're dragging out different generations. But sometimes you do want to bring in the real stuff, right? And so once again, you might be working with something that you're testing out your designs, but you want to see it live. I saw someone was from Portland, Oregon, right? Let's go and search that, and boom, we got a real little web app here that actually works in Subframe directly still on that design layer, and lets you test out some of these things without having to go into different tools. So I thought this was pretty cool. We just added the ability to actually import libraries in here. And the way I did that was literally by annotating my design, which looked like this. And I said, use pigeon maps to implement a working responsive map. And so I was just able to annotate the designs without having to go to a chat-based tool to bring in this type of functionality. So that's probably going to be a follow-up. Going deep into prototyping, it's still an early beta, but yeah, it gets you even closer to, testing things out while you're still on that design layer before you bring things to tools like Bolt, and hopefully being able to create a design system that actually works with AI tools and that gives you that full control. So I'll end here. Appreciate everyone for following along, but yeah, let's open up to Q&A.
You should take a deep breath
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions in the chat for you to go through, and
Okay. All right.
you've just been rolling for over an hour. So have a sip of water, take a deep breath, and then go
Thank
again.
you. Let me catch up here. Okay, how did we get the design? We got a prompt, drag and dropping. Great. Touch base with the image Figma and other icons. Oh, yeah. So I'm just gonna kind of go through top to bottom. Rahul asked about image Figma in the AI input section. They both kind of do the same thing, which is uploading an image for as a prompt, and recreating it using your design system in Subframe. So again, it's a quick way. It's not going to be perfect, but the whole point is it's actually trying to rebuild it with your components, and then, you could tweak it in Subframe after that. So it's really good for entire pages to get started, or even just like small snippets. Sometimes I just take, like, if I want like fake content, I'll literally just be like, grab just the screenshot of a list and then say, create this list for me, right? And then, or apply it to one I already have in my designs. Um, yeah, storybook. Okay. Okay, so for BYOC, Sean asked, once components are imported, how do they stay in sync with your storybook library and what you're doing and modifying in Subframe? Yes, that's one of so they stay in sync via your code, similar just like command. If an engineer makes an update, there's a small like command to run to push it back into Subframe, so that you kind of get a little bit of versioning. Um, what changes with BIOC is that those components today, you can't edit the same way we created those variants and stuff. You could still create custom components and then sort of feed it back into it. But you lose the ability to do all of those adjustments on the components that you've brought in. And I think that's something that we can probably a problem we can solve, whether it's just the fine tuning or whether it's actually making updates. But it does become a question of design system governance of like, does that mean there's an official PR that needs to be made, right, to then update it back into Storybook and review it? And that's why we really want to keep the components and Subframe like dumb. Like bringing in components allows you to actually bring in interactive components, which is really cool. But there is that trade-off between, are you still just in design mode, or are you actually like rendering a real functional thing with logic and complexity? Figma variables, yeah, I think we can get there. I'm doing something that's basically just lets you copy and paste a bunch of CSS variables. And Figma does, or at least there's like easy plugins that let you take your variables and render them and as CSS. So I think that's a pretty easy one. I would say next week that's definitely going to be out. Subframe is React only, unfortunately. Could you throw a wireframe and have Subframe use it? Yeah, that's a good way to go from lo-fi to hi-fi. David Richard, could we give the AI global instruction to create only pages with blank layout or blank plus custom nav component? I think you could try that in that little prompt box. Um, for like the system one. I also think we're just gonna be just we get a lot of asks for more layouts, and I think that's something we can do pretty soon. And so then that gets also into a world where, do you need to tell it specifically, or as you add more pages, the AI will learn? I think that's a big thing with a lot of what we did is we just had a blank project similar to like starting from blank anywhere else, and the AI gets significantly better the more pages you have. I would say once you have like about 10 pages in Subframe, it really starts to pick up on those patterns and just do a good job, whether it's picking a layout or just again recreating certain like even things that aren't componentized. All right, subframe custom spacing variables. We rely on Tailwind right now. There's ways to modify that if you do bring your own components, and that's because when you do bring in your components, we not only update like Tailwind code export and stuff, we do whatever it takes to make it match the formats that you're using. Modes for tokens, not yet. We have like basically one theme and it's either light mode or dark mode or whatever you set it up to be. I think multiple modes, like kind of side by side would be awesome. I would say that's coming in future theme updates. Yeah, theme switcher. Yeah, still pretty much only React and Figma is probably going to be only on the token import level until I don't know if anyone here is a expert in MCP servers because I'm not, and how much that actually helps or how much of it is just hype, Twitter hype. But I think there's interesting things for giving it context. I think just at the end of the day, you know, we really like the sort again, that source of truth, the system is defined in subframe, and so we don't necessarily want to take like random components that were created with potentially breaking changes. It's the same reason why Figma hasn't solved code export, is because they just can't support all the different things you can do there. Um, but I think, yeah, just making things easier to at least get started or bring it in from code, which is the source of truth, is great. Yeah, starting in Bolt and adding subframe after probably gets you into some annoying points. All these tools have different ranges, like Lovable and Bolt lean more into like they kind of force you down a path. They pre-optimize. Things like Replit and Cursor are way more on the you could do anything you want and set up your system. We do have a starter kit for each of those that basically tells it in the beginning, like, hey, use subframe, this is how it works. Or, Next.js or Vite, like just defaults to it. And that usually is it's a better starting point. But yeah, I think there's some troubleshooting, some, you know, rules or system prompting that needs to be done to really have it follow subframe. Let's see. Homepage. Okay. There's a question about, yeah, MUI. If it's already built in production, we can again work to import those components. Or yeah, otherwise it's about rebuilding them. Uh, how does it compare to tempo? So I haven't played around with tempo too much. I believe they are more of like running a local version. Unless they also move to web. But yeah, the point is that some of those tools in those categories, like Onlook and Tempo and stuff, they're in the category of like a visual IDE running on top of your code base, where you can, essentially do what you can in Cursor with just a more of a visual preview. Now the difference is I think they do have more of these design controls, but everything is still an LLM call and everything is like working on live code. Subframe, right? We have a full design layer that's just real moving stuff around, changing colors. You don't have to ask chat, you don't have to wait for something to update. And then it's also, again, operating one level deeper where, I think we're gonna get closer to being like way more integrated with a working app in the future. But right now it's by default. We believe designers need a little bit of breathing room, right? Like design is a little bit of that sandbox where you just want to try things out, you want to break it, like you're gonna have messy files and things that don't work. But then you can just refine it and it's still a handoff process, but you're just handing off the same code. You're working with the same material instead of having to go through a layer of translation at the same time. And of course, syncing components and things makes that even easier. And so yeah, I think that that kind of parallels with your question, Roger, about handoff. Yeah, whole pages, different teams do it different ways. So I think it's kind of your dependent on your appetite for like kind of like speed and keeping things like truly well organized, similar to Figma. So whole pages, usually if it's a brand new features, we usually see people copy that whole thing, the entire page into, a new file. And basically developers start working from there. You have to do some things, right? It's like we hard code strings, and sometimes those strings are going to be uh like const the variables that then you have to fit in. So I think it really depends on the developer. Some developers think that's really annoying where they're like, oh, I'd rather just get the little snippet and like why do I have to put this thing into like cursor, into brackets now. Some developers think it's a lot faster because they're like, wow, I didn't have to write a single line, a single div and a single line of Tailwind, and it's rendering there. And now all I have to do is fill in the data blocks. But yeah, once you go on a page level, you're technically divorced from that page from Subframe, right? If a developer then changes that code, well, it's in its own file somewhere that's hasn't shipped. They can change it. So that's why I think, yeah, just making sure to communicate like changes and working more on that inspect level, especially when you're integrating with an existing feature and copying the snippets you need and the styles you need and thinking of it as like a Tailwind generator using your components. That seems like a good workflow. But at the end of the day, yeah, we also seen people who really componentize these bigger and bigger building blocks where you just slot in like layout, right? Or section and page header. And, it becomes a lot less divs and a lot more of like pre-existing components. Um, because then a designer might go in and just update a component and that's going to change it. All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in and sticking around. I hope it was helpful. Please like after this, I don't know if there's like a Loom feature, but like any feedback on, what would be more helpful to see, what maybe either in the future or what we may have missed in this one, that would be amazing. I just super great to have so many people join in the middle of a Thursday to well, hear someone talk about design systems and AI. Um, you guys, so that's awesome. I really appreciate that. And yeah, I'm always around. You could find me. Let me drop a link to our Slack community. That's a good place to do a quick DM. Otherwise, LinkedIn, um, Twitter, all the interwebs are a good place to to be. But yeah, we're really interested in learning more from designers, how you're using Subframe, where it could help you, and then if you are working on a team with an existing design system and you're really eager to bring it into a tool like Subframe, so you could prototype with it and basically eliminate that handoff process today, do let me know. We're working with companies to get their components in.